Well, hi there. I'm going to show you how to do a scarf with the easy textured beginner stitch. So I'll just get my things and we will get started. Okay, so let's cast on. The loom is set up. I'm using 11 pegs, and so I'm just going to do these two always together. So I've marked it, and these two always together. So I've marked it, so it's easier to mark it now. And you can do any width you like for this project. It doesn't matter. You can have it as wide or as thin as you personally like. Okay, so what I do first is I make a slip knot just by going like this. So I'm just taking this and twisting it like that, and then I just put the working yarn through it and pull, and I have a slip knot, and then I just put it on the peg. And then what I do is I take the hook, put it down, and scoop up the yarn to get a loop, and pull that loop through, and then use this to tighten it. And this is a type of crochet chain cast on, and it's the one I usually do because it's easy to match it with the bind off, and I like the way it looks. Okay, so you take this one and you put it behind the peg, put the working yarn through it, and snug it up. Put it behind the next peg, working yarn through, and snug it up. Behind the next peg, working yarn through, snug it up. That's all there is to it. Very easy cast on to do. Works good in the round too. And we go down to the last peg here, and I just put it over, tighten it up, and then knit it over, and that holds it. And make sure that this one stayed tight so it looks good on that end. And then what I do is 2 rows of owl eye. There's no purls in this, and the owl eye, 2 rows of owl eye is balanced and won't curl. And so I'm just going to take the working yarn, go over the first 2 pegs, keeping it loose. Okay, so I'll get up here so you can see I'm keeping it quite loose, and then I'm going to knit over like that. I'm going to take the working yarn, go over the next 2 pegs, knit off, over the next 2 pegs, knit off. So I'm always rewrapping peg 1, going over peg 1 and 2, knitting off. Now this one goes, this is peg 1, we go around peg 1 and 2, knit off. So we're always giving each peg 2 stitches over peg 1 and 2, on peg 1, front of peg 1 and 2 again, and knit off. So that's all there is to doing the owl eye stitch. I have lots of videos on owl eye if you want to look at it more. Okay, now for my second row, I'm going to actually just have this as the first row of my pattern. So I'm going to work ahead a little more so you can actually see what the stitch looks like, and then come back so I have a little bit of the work to show you. And our first row of this pattern is always 1 row of owl eye and then a row of ewrap, and we treat the sides in owl eye stitch, and I will demonstrate that, but I'm just going to work ahead a little so you can see what it looks like. Okay, I'm going to show you how to do this easy textured beginner stitch. It's very easy, and it doesn't curl as long as you do the sides loose, and I'll show you how to do that. And it has just a really beautiful texture. There you go. And so the yarn I'm using is Charisma, and the color is, what's the color here? It is Stormy, and it's a bulky 5. And the loom I'm using here is a Martha Stewart loom. It's a 3/4 inch. It's the same gauge as the Nifty Knitter set. Or if you have the loops and thread knitting set, that's the same as that. And I'm using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 pegs. And gives me this wide. When the other side looks like this, so it's it looks nice too. See it on the other color here. Okay, so it's a very easy stitch to do, and I make notes so that I know. So I know that I'm doing one stitch to the right and the other stitch to the left, and if I forget, I have a little note there, and I've just clipped it on with a stitch marker and a piece of paper. And I'll show you how to do this particular edge as I get along. So the first row is going to be owl eye stitch. Now to do owl eye, you just put the working yarn over the first peg in a ewrap formation, knit it over. Then you go back around that peg and knit it and the next peg and keep it loose and just knit them over. So this peg got 2 stitches. Now this one will get its second stitch by wrapping around it and wrapping over the next peg, knitting it off. And now that one's had its 2 stitches. So easy way to remember this is wherever your working yarn is, you're on peg 1, you go over peg 1 and 2, knit them off. And always keep it loose. Go over peg 1 and 2, knit them off. Now if you find you get tight, all you have to do is pull on this and loosen it. So even if you're a very tight knitter, you can do this stitch and keep it loose. And then knit it over. Next peg, knit the 2 over, peg 1 over 1 and 2, keeping it loose, and just knit it over. There's a little gear icon, bottom right of your YouTube video. If you click on it, it can slow down the video, so you can watch it slower if that helps you. So taking the working yarn, going behind peg 1, over peg 1 and 2, keeping it loose, and knitting it over. And that's your first row. And now we go over peg 1 and 2, and that's our end peg. Now you notice I've marked the end pegs. I've got a marker on these 2 end pegs, and I've got a marker on these 2. Well, this one's green, so it's marked, and I put a marker here because these 2 pegs are always going to be an owl eye edge, which I'm going to show you how to do now. So I just did owl eye down here. Now I'm going to rewrap this peg, and I'm going to keep this nice and loose. We want the edges loose, and knit it over, and then knit over the next peg, and then knit it over in preparation to do this one, but don't do this one, just knit this one. And now we're going to do an ewrap back until we get to this peg. We're always going to do the owl eye on these 2 pegs, so we're just going to go back to the peg there. So now we just ewrap it and keep the ewrap with a consistent tension. If you can't wrap all the pegs without getting tight, just wrap one at a time. That's fine to do it just like this. So to ewrap, you go behind the peg, in front, knit it over. Behind the peg, in front, knit it over. Okay, or if you want, you can do more than one at a time. Just like that. Then you come over here, do your first stitch of the owl eye stitch, wrap the 2. Now you want to keep this loose, so make sure it's loose. Keep your edges loose. Wrap these 2. give this one its second wrap and wrap the next one, because this row is owl eye. So we continue doing owl eye all the way down, keeping it loose. It loose, and that's all there is to it. You're on peg 1, you wrap peg 1 and 2 and knit them over. Peg 1, you wrap peg 1 and 2, knit it over. Now when we come back, we do the owl eye on these 2 pegs, the second wrap on it, and then go in to do the ewrap, which you can just go ahead and do, but I don't want to confuse you, so I'm going to do the second wrap and then just come over and do the ewrap, and then just ewrap. So that's all there is to it, and it's really a nice textured easy stitch. Keeping these loose keeps it from curling because it gives it the same tension, or keeping your edges loose gives you the same tension as in the rest of it. So no purls are needed, and depending on the yarn you use, some yarns will give you even more texture than this one. And you can see it better from the side. It's just got a really pretty texture to it. Okay, so that's how you do the stitch. Okay, so once you get as long as you want to be, and what you want is, if you're doing the scarf, you might want to make it wider, then you would use more pegs. And it doesn't matter if it's odd or even, you can use as many pegs as you want to get it as wide as you want. This would be a narrower type of scarf, and sometimes when I make short scarves, I make them narrow like this, and then I do about 35 to 40 inches for a short scarf. For a long scarf, 60 I usually do, but some people do it longer. And if you want to do an infinity scarf, usually 55 is enough, or longer if you wanted to loop it more times. If this is going to be a headband, then I do about 17 inches for me. I have a small head, so most people would do it a little larger, but you would measure, and you could, by measuring where the headband would fit, you would know how long you wanted it to be. So I'm going to show you how to bind off now, so you know how to bind off, and of course you can make it any length you want. So here I am, and I'm over here at the beginning peg, and I'm just going to do a stretchy type of bind off. And so what I like to do is take the working yarn and wind it around a couple times to make sure that I'm long enough, so 2.5 to 3, and then I cut it. And I'm just going to make mine a little bit longer today. So I'm just going to get my scissors, and I'll get right back to you. Okay, so here I am. I've got it on the needle, and I'm just going to get it like this. Now, what we do is we're always going to be going down the new peg we do and up the old peg we do. And so to start off, I have to get somewhere. So this is going to be a new peg, so I'm just going to go down this first peg and then come around in between it and go down this peg. I got the elastic. Go down and then come up. So you're just putting the needle up through the loop, this peg, and then I just tighten it a bit, and then you're going to go behind the peg that was the first peg and tighten it and go down the new peg right here. Peg 3 is the new peg, and then go up the second peg, and then go between them and go around and go down the new peg, always keeping it tight, and up the peg before. And then behind, pull, keep it nice and tight, and go down the new peg and up the peg before. Keeping it tight, and then down the new peg, up the peg before, tightening, going between them and behind the first peg, and then there's the new peg, there's the old peg, going up between them and then down the new peg. Up the old peg, then behind, down the new peg, up the old peg, behind, down the new peg, up the old peg, behind. Now we're on the last one, so we go down the new peg, up the old peg, and then we're just going to go either up or down, it doesn't matter, this peg, and I put the knot in it and just tighten it up, and then when it's off I will secure it better. Tighten that up. Okay, so then you just cut it so you have something to weave in at the end, and you're all done. You just take it off the loom, and where did my loom hook go? I grab another one. I find them usually. Eventually you just take it off the loom, and it's going to be a little stretched from you taking it off. So after you take it off, you're just going to stretch it a bit until it looks like this, and it matches very nicely with the way we cast on, as you can see. And that's all there is to it. And then you're just going to take, go to the wrong side and put the working yarn through to the wrong side. And then you're just going to weave your end in. And then you weave the end in here. And that's all there is to it. You have a scarf, and you stretch out your stitches. So just stretch it out really nice, and then we will take a good look at it. You stretch it both ways. Okay, and then you can see that the cast off and the bind off and the cast on match up really nice. They are the same width, and they have about the same stretch. And that's what you want. You want both ends to look the same and not have one that's tight and won't stretch. So there you go. Your sides look like that. And so there you go.